when all of your plans are canceled, how do you tune into yourself, break through resistances, trust yourself, and then create your own new opportunities? Well, during the pandemic, our next guest went from Broadway to her small hometown in Ohio, and this is the story of the opportunities that she made for herself. Welcome to this episode of She Made It. I'm your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Clara. Hey, Clara.
Hi, Elle. It's so great to be here. I'm very excited about this episode in particular.
Yes, it was. Okay, so one of the crazy things about this conversation that I had with our guest, Alessandra, was she talked about the importance and what would I call it? Being aware of the impeccable timing in our life and how things sort of show up or unfold. And the way we met this guest is through an impeccable moment of timing. I'd love you to share a little bit about it.
So I met Alessandra through my husband, Ben. She's actually related to him. And she's been coming over to our house every week or so to record her articles in an audio format. Ben is an audio engineer, and he engineers this podcast, actually. So it's been really neat to get to know her more in that way and see her and hear her work. So I'm so excited to hear her full story.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in our conversation. It's sort of like articles, essays. I don't know if there's any poetry, but it's sort of like a unique format for a podcast, but she's really just exploring opportunities to show up as the artist that she is in whatever circumstance the world is providing. So one of the things that Claire and I have been working on are some free resources for you, our listeners, because so many people are in transition right now as the world's sort of like emerging and opening back up. So we have this resource called Graceful Transitions. So if your world has recently been turned upside down or you're in the need of some grounding practices, I really would love you to take advantage of this free Guide to Graceful Transitions. It's a place to settle, to recenter, to find your authentic self when everything else has changed. So you can find it at ellzimmerman.com/downloads to access it.
Yeah, I'm really excited that we get to share this with our listeners, and also so grateful for what our listeners share with us through reviews. And Elle and I talked about, we get so much great feedback on the podcast that we want to share it. So before we jump into today's conversation, I want to read a review from someone who is a podcast listener. This is from @Cirque67. She says, "Love how open and honest you are, Elle. I enjoyed hearing your story and how after years you found your creative awakening. I've been on a journey for the past couple of years to rediscover myself and tap into my creativity. I'm looking forward to hearing the journeys of other women." So I think that this episode with Alessandra.
Well, wait a minute. She also said, "I enjoy your conversations with Clara and hearing her thoughts and comments about your guests as well." So don't leave yourself off, right? Yeah, and the reason we even share this review with you is because we get such great feedback. And, the goal is to really help inspire and help people align with their authentic creative purpose. And the podcast really helps people hear stories of others, which gives them the courage and the strength and the community to do it on their own. And reviews are the way that people learn about the podcast. So we would be humbled and honored if you would take time to do a review for us, for She Made It. I know, Claire, it can be a little confusing. So don't you have a little resource where people can even go for reviewing?
I do. They can go to ellzimmerman.com/review to see all the steps to leave a review. And if you do, it just might end up on the next podcast. So before we transition into Elle's interview with Alessandra, I wanted to share a little bit of her background. Alessandra Marconi is a versatile artist based in New York. She's originally from Ohio, and she stays busy in collaboration with various creative developments and performances both locally and internationally. Currently, she is the dance supervisor of Hamilton Phillip Tour, and her recent work includes Broadway's Harry Potter and the Cursed Child and Warner Brothers' In the Heights, to name just a few. She also teaches dance classes in New York City and is currently producing a number of her own projects, all to tell stories through movement, words, and conversation. Stay tuned to listen to this inspiring conversation with Alessandra Marconi.
Welcome to this episode of She Made It. I am your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I'm so excited about our next conversation with Alessandra Marconi. She is an incredible artist, dancer, choreographer, writer. She is a movement maker, an initiative maker, and I'm so excited to hear a little bit of the peek behind the curtain on how she adapted during COVID, being a stage performer, a live event performer, and how did she sort of create opportunities and new outlets for her artistry, her creativity during this oh so unique time. So welcome, Alessandra.
Hi, Elle. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Alessandra, for our listeners, interestingly, you are based in Harlem, New York, but originally from Ohio, which is where I'm located. So where in Ohio are you from? I guess the question could be, where are you podcasting in from today?
Where am I today? I am talking to you from the inside of my farmhouse that I grew up in. This farmhouse is 200 years old, and it's located in Trenton, Ohio. So it's about an hour north of Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And so I have created an office space, a creative space within this old farmhouse, which is giving me so much life in this time.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that due to the pandemic, you left New York and came back.
Well, it's a funny and it's a story about timing, really. I left New York because I was given the job to be the dance supervisor of Hamilton. They have several tours, and I was going to be in charge of one of them. It's called the Phillip Tour. And I left New York City, moved out, put all of my things in storage. It was a big page turn of my life. I had been there for 10 years. I went to college there. I grew up there, in a sense. And I left the first week of March to join.
Oh my goodness.
To join tour. And I was in Toronto, Canada. And 5 days after arriving there, Broadway shut down.
Wow.
So it is due to the pandemic, but not really, I had already planned to move out of New York for a few years. This is a job that I was looking to keep for several years.
Sure. And well, first of all, yes, a story of timing. How interesting. I'm curious, when you left in the early March, we were already starting to get like murmurs of the pandemic. So you just, did you see it coming?
Well, we were getting murmurs. We were in rehearsal, a big rehearsal studio on 42nd Street, prepping another company of Hamilton to set up shop in LA. And so I was there kind of shadowing and learning about my job. So we were all together for a week before I left. And there were murmurs. There was a lot of hand sanitizer. There was a lot of stuff happening, but it was like a steamroller. We were just going forward. There was no murmurs yet of shutting down. Maybe that was a denial period. But New York was still New York when I left.
Wow.
But I did have a feeling that it was not a bad idea I was leaving. I had this feeling like, I think some things are about to happen. And, this timing is very blessed.
That is so interesting. And what's also sort of, I guess, bittersweet about it is that what a job you were stepping into.
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge. I have been involved with the creative team of Hamilton for a long time, specifically the choreographer.
Yeah, whose Yeah, he's from Ohio, right?
Cincinnati native. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've known and worked with him for a long time, and we have a really great creative relationship. And this job had been offered to me, a little been tabled here and there. That's sort of how the industry goes. It is one of impeccable timing. So, several years ago, it kind of surfaced on the table, and then was taken away. Then I did other things and blah, blah, blah. And this, we met in the fall of 2019. He was teaching a class, Andy was teaching a class, and I had a feeling he doesn't teach classes that much anymore. He got quite busy. And so he emailed a bunch of us that are close to him and work with him and said, I'm having this class, please come if you can. And I had a feeling, I said, I need to go. I need to say hi to him. And as soon as I walked in the studio door, he said, "Hey, how are you doing?" I said, "I'm good." "How are you?" And he said, "Good. How's Harry Potter?" Because I was the movement supervisor for Harry Potter on Broadway at the time. And I said, "It's really great. I'm enjoying it. It was a new experience for me." And so I said, "It's really wonderful, but it's part-time." I said, "They're calling me in just on a daily basis, as needed basis." And he said, "Well, we need another dance supervisor, and I want to know if I can put your name in the hat." And I said, "Yes, you can." I said, "And if you want to talk to me a little bit more, you can give me a call." And he said, "Okay, great. I'll get going." And I said, "Awesome." So I took the class, and just sort of, it was a moment of like, you listen to yourself and you know what you need to do, and just like persistence and vision and hard work is what will unfold the best path for you. And so, just a couple weeks after that, I wouldn't even say, I would say a couple days later, really, I started getting the phone calls of like, "Okay, so do you want to do this? Is this something in your sight? Are you committed? Da, da, da. This is work in your life. You're going to be living on tour, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Yes, I want something long-term. I'm ready to do this." And they said, "Okay, great." You got it.
Wow. Wow. So I want to back up just a minute, because you're just like lightly throwing out, "And I'm doing Broadway's Harry Potter, but what's fascinating about you is that you went to college in Manhattan, but you have a BA in communication arts, journalism, and French. So I'm wondering, where is the dance choreographer? Where is all that coming into your life?
That's always been there. I found dance again when I was, 10-ish. And around age 13, I sat my parents down and I said, "I want you to know that I'm not doing this just for fun anymore. I want you to know that I am going to pursue this as a career."
Wow, at 13.
Yeah, because, it's a competitive age. If you're looking to do something that not everybody can do, right? The athletes have a very narrow threshold. And it's around that age, think gymnasts, think runners, anybody really, you start training
Swimmers,
quite young.
Yep.
Yeah, you train quite young, and you really got to decide. A couple of years before that, I wanted to be a gymnast. There were some things along the way that I've always been active physically, and then when I found dance, it was so much more. It got me in touch with my body in a way at that young age, is like, you can't quite describe, but you feel like you have superpowers because now I understand that as the spirit merging with the physical. There is something more about creating art physically. And so I sat them down, and I said, I thank you for taking me to dance class every day. I would go to, school and then dance in the evening. And then on the weekends, we'd go to workshops in the tri-state area, or, Nashville, or something close-ish. And I'd keep training. And so it really started to build from there.
My question, though, is why? So then, if that's the path, that's the passion, then why wasn't it your studies in college?
Good question. Because you can absolutely do that. You can get a BFA. I knew that if I was asked to dance every day from 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m., I would hate it. I would not love it anymore. And it's part of my personality that I follow the flow. I don't like to be boxed in. I don't like to be made to do something. I like a hard lesson. That's fine. Consistency, it absolutely has a place, but I could not visualize myself wanting to put, pink tights on every morning at 8.
But let me ask you this, because I have a BFA in musical theater. That's my background, and I was the opposite. I was craving the 8 to 5 immersion into what I love. Now, of course, I wasn't dance, which would have been a little bit more narrow. But it took me a while to get to my BFA. I did the opposite journey before I actually came to the conclusion that this is really what I want to do. And I totally relate to this spiritual, soulful aspect of movement, dance, creating art. In fact, I as I was reading through kind of like your story and your journey, there's a part of me that wishes that I had danced earlier, because I think I'm really a dancer. Although I was a singer, if you think of musical theater, I was mostly a singer, actor, and a dancer who could fake it really, really well. But I love dance. I love the integration of my body into the expression, of and how it flows into art. But did you choose the path? Like, well, why did you choose the path? One, you knew you didn't want to be immersed all day, but also, was there a sense of, I need a little security, or, my parents don't really want me to do it to the full,
Sure. No,
I hear that a lot.
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. My mom has always worked in education, so she was very helpful with college applications and things like that. So I did something tricky where I only applied to schools in New York because that's where I wanted to go. And at a certain point, I knew that was the only way I was going to get to go to New York. We don't have money just to go there and try it, and I didn't graduate college with a job offer right away. So all of my mentors, were saying, you got to get there, you got to grind, you got to do it, you'll get the job, blah, blah, blah. And I specifically remember my oldest sister said to me on the phone, she said, these are 4 years that you'll never get back. And she said, it is a time to get to understand yourself, to get to learn. And I want you to just think about that, and you're being given the opportunity to do that. And so I thought about it and I said, all right, but really what was under it was, I got to get to New York somehow. So for me, that passion, that motivation led me to understand that I could do both at the same time. And the other thing about me is that I like a lot of things. So I like learning about other things, journalism, French, all that stuff. Like, that's why I went in that direction, because I just couldn't choose. I just couldn't pick one. And it kind of got really bad when I was in school, because I took an art class and my professor said, you should really be an art major. And I, one moment, just put my, head in my hands and was like, I can't do everything.
Yeah. What a problem, right?
Oh my gosh. And international relations. I love learning. So I wanted to soak up every bit of academia I could from my school. So that's really why I chose to be a full-time major of something other than the arts. So it was communication arts was the general major that I took. And I knew, because of all the work I had been doing leading up to turning 18 and being of age, I felt like I had enough of a network within the performance industry that I could do it, that I could go to one person's class and go to an audition and go to this performance, and be able to make myself known and immerse myself in that way. Because any performer or anyone really in an industry knows it's about who you know, and it's about the network, and it's about how you show up. If you don't show up, it's not happening.
Right. Like the dance class, you said impeccable timing, So you graduated from college with the BA in Communication Arts. You said you didn't have a job. You're looking at these opportunities, going to auditions, going to workshops. So I guess my question is, would you call yourself a dancer, a choreographer, a teacher? Because you talked about, have you been in as a dancer, or what is your role, sort of the way you envision yourself now through dance?
I call myself an artist at this point, because I do a lot of different things. I do what the job needs. I am a dancer by first, I guess, recognition. My first impulse in making something is how it feels. So I feel it through my body. That actually doesn't mean I always make choreography or I always want to dance, but I do feel the material in my body. And sometimes it comes out through words. It depends what the project needs.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. It's a great question you ask, Elle, because I grapple with that. When people say, hey, how are you? Or, who are you? What do you do? There's so many things to say. It's sort of like, well, what do you want to know? What specifically are you asking me? And so I've landed, what feels good now is artist. I'm an artist because I just like to make things.
Yeah. And so when it comes, so thank you for sharing that, because I do love that. And I think especially with COVID, and here's this incredible job, you sort of launch this path, and then you're back home in the barn, which I think the way you describe it is so beautiful, and like this little sanctuary of creativity. And now what you're doing, I'd love for you to share, because it's so different, but yet it sounds so clear that it's part of your journey. So share with us kind of what pivot you made.
Sure. I guess I didn't make so much of a pivot as an uncovering to who I am and what I am capable of. I realized that while I was in New York, chasing dreams, I was pigeonholing myself. And that's not something I only do. I think the industry does that. The industry wants to know if you're a dancer, or if you're a singer, or if you do comedies, or blah, 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 and that it's difficult. And I think a lot of people miss out on opportunities, and actually maybe true callings even, because they're trying to fit this mold. So what I realized because when I was in Canada, I applied for a grant, and it was through the Peace Studio, and they're based out of New York, and they commission artists to make work in the pursuit of peace. And so I was awarded this grant, and they said, make something that can be digitally shared, that is for peace. And I said, oh, okay, interesting. So I was living with my dance partner there. His name's Crazy Smooth, and he's a dancer. He's a b-boy. And we together do Hustle, which is a partner dance that was based in New York. It was.
And back up, what is b-boy?
A b-boy is a type of street dance style. You'll probably recognize it being popular in the 80s with all of the air flares and the head spins, and
sure.
Breaking is the style.
Yeah.
So they're b-boys and b-girls. And so he has his own company there, which brings b-boying and b-girling into the concert space. It's called b-boyism. And so while I was there for 6 months, just again, timing, just impeccable timing, we were able to dance together a lot because we normally are long distance. So I said, oh, let me use Hustle, because Hustle brings us joy. And seeing people dancing together is really rare in a time when we're all being asked to stay home and we barely see anybody. So I was like, okay, I can offer this. And so I did that. And that felt really cool. I mean, I got to edit, again, which is something that I had done several years ago, but several years prior.
Do you mean like film edit, like video edit?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I got to edit. So I had to only use my iPhone. Like I had to be resourceful in ways that I hadn't been asked to in a while. I was like, okay, so let me use my iPhone. It's really good quality, right? But this is what I got. And we're going to set up a tripod and we're going to film, in different locations. And so I had this whole storyboard, planned out. And then I realized, okay, what kind of music do I want to use? And so then I thought about it and I wrote a poem. And it, to me, was a sort of time capsule of what I was experiencing and what 2020 was, which was to be in the moment and do what you can, the best you can for this moment. What will make you feel the best now? Because that's all we have. And so I wrote a poem with that in mind. And I went out into his shed and made it into a sound booth. And I was like, oh, wow, I could just make a sound booth here. So I put him in the sound booth too, and he recorded it. And then I employed my sound designer friend in LA to compose an original track and put our voices on it. And so before I knew it, I had made this whole little project. And I, after that, realized I'm quite resourceful. I was like, this is cool. And more so, it was like, that makes me feel good, and I like doing that. And so it kind of blossomed from there. And so when I came to Ohio, I said, okay, what am I going to do here? And so
before we move to Ohio, I have a couple questions. So first of all, I love how you describe it as the uncovering. And there's this joy and delight in discovering this part of you. And, again, I'm pointing that out because a lot of our listeners, you talked about the pigeonhole that you felt or that you could have seen in your future if the pandemic hadn't happened, if you hadn't had this grant. So I just want to call to mind that it was this discovery of other talents, other resources. But my other question for you is, what is Hustle?
Hustle is a partner dance that was born out of the South Bronx in New York in the early 70s. So you might remember, do the hustle, bum, bum, bum,
yeah.
Ba-dum. So we never use that song, but I say it because it is recognition. It's a partner dance. It's a dance that was done in the streets, in living rooms, family gatherings. It's similar, you can liken it to mambo or salsa or swing, Lindy, things like that. But it's New York born and bred. So I found it through a street dance party, through a house party is what it's called, house music. So I used to go to these parties in New York that would go from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And I'd see the dancers, the actual living heartbeat of New York City. And these are whackers. They pop, they house dance, they break, and sometimes they just groove. They just do a two-step. But it was, for me, opened up a jar, was oh, this is how you communicate, because it is all about communicating with your body in street dance. It's how you solve, you think of a battle, dance battles, Yeah. Those are now kind of competitive in nature, and maybe they're adjudicated and things like that, but is also a way for people to settle arguments in a non-harmful way, in an unharmful way.
And so that was the incorporation into the Peace Project or the Peace Grant.
So that dance, Hustle, yes, the partner dance is what we used as a way to express joy and connection and listening without words.
This is so beautiful and fascinating, and it's so intriguing. I would just love to kind of give, like, is there a shout out on how people can find this, your project, or did you share it publicly yet?
Yes, I absolutely have. So my website holds all the videos that I have of my work. It's alessandranyc.com. And also you could go to the Peace Studio, peacestudio.org, and see the 100 offerings that were commissioned in pursuit of peace there. So
So
I
cool.
am one of those.
Yeah.
But yes, you can find out more about Hustle as well through my website. I used to produce parties and social gatherings. I teach. I pass on the language for the next generation.
Yeah, so then thank you for that segue. Speaking of language, because that's through, dance and movement, and I love how you talk about it as a form of communication and peacemaking. And then you shifted to Ohio, and this is kind of a little bit of the phase of where you are right now. So can you share with us sort of what's on the plate right now?
Yeah. So I came back to Ohio and helping my parents and reconnecting with home. And I feel fortunate to be able to do that. But in that same moment was like, what am I going to do here? What is going to happen? But, I sat with it. I wrestled with it. I am grateful to have a home. I am grateful to have shelter right now. I'm grateful to have warm meals. There's so much about that is enough already. But I need to create, we're still not back to work. Nothing's available, and we're being asked to just sit or not do it. But that's impossible. So I said, what's happening here and what can I do? So I started a couple of different projects. Well, I started by just connecting with people I knew here, my teachers I referenced earlier, down at Planet Dance. We are working on a film project together, and I'm producing that and also dancing in it. I've hired a composer, I've hired a videographer local here. We're using the farmhouse actually as one of our locations to film. So I'm excited about that project. And then I've also started writing more because when I got here, things were still kind of shut down. And I said, writing is something I can do on my own. So I started thinking about what to do, and I have my own sort of reporting project that's happening. But I'm also starting to dig up old pieces and revive them and things like that, and starting to compile them all in one space because now I have the time and I'll say confidence to identify as a writer. Not to say that I hadn't before, because I had published with various publications just out of college. But then performing took the front seat, So now also I've changed. My voice has changed. What I care about has, I think, been more refined. And so I started writing a piece that is a reflection piece about performing with Fish, the band, at Madison Square Garden on the eve of 2020. So we had this epic coming into 2020. And what happened at that concert, I realized months later, was a really beautiful foreshadowing of the year to come. And I realized that in the fall of 2020. So I quickly started writing, and it's turned out to be a really cool, another time capsule of what this is, and also runs parallel everything we've learned collectively in the last year. Wow. So that's a piece that I'm really passionate about and going to be sharing with the world soon. So I have written it. We'll be self-publishing on Medium, and also created an audio version of that, which I'm really excited about. I guess kind of bringing in my editing and all of those tools. Although I have worked with a friend of mine. He's actually a relative, Ben Malson, and
who, by the way, is the sound engineer for She Made It.
Yes, exactly. So again, just this most beautiful timing of everything coming together. So he's helping produce the audio versions of my writings.
Yeah, so like it's so I will just be honest with you. It's a little overwhelming for me to take all this in because it's so incredible and it's so inspiring and it's so like and I will tell you that I know there are a lot of listeners out there that are going, "Oh my gosh, how does she do all of this? How does she get from idea to pushing through the resistance to take the risk to how does all getting the pieces of the puzzle together and the collaborators and I'd love to kind of get a little peek behind the curtain of what was hard about all this and what resistances came up and where were you afraid?
That's a really great question. I do a lot of spiritual work as well. So I like to follow where I feel resistance. If you come up against things that bring fear or any sort of resistance, adversity, or anything, I chose and continue to choose to lean into that. I have a belief of the world that is about sort of identifying, acknowledging these things that are hard, and feeling them and letting them go. So I like to address these things, and live through them. So if I feel resistance, I first need to understand if it's because I don't know enough about a certain topic. So maybe I need to do more research, and that's why I'm feeling resistant, because I don't have the tools. Or am I feeling resistant because I'm scared to be honest with myself?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm afraid I'll hurt someone with my words. I grapple with that a lot, when I don't want to hurt anybody. However, honesty uncovers freedom, right? And
Right.
acknowledging, being able to name experiences is, I think, one of the most empowering things to lead to freedom, to lead to, oh my gosh, okay, that was really heavy on my shoulders for a couple of minutes or a couple of years. There's some thought patterns that we get really stuck in. And in the past year, I have been fully dedicated to uncovering those and rewiring those,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can get the desired outcome I want. So I have a lot of peers that work this way too. And so I'm in conversation with them, and even some of them facilitate workshops on this. So I'm constantly seeking, how can I clear? How can I let go? How can I just move through this? And so it takes patience, and it takes consistent pursuit,
Mm-hmm. So I have so first of all, thank you for sharing, because this is the stuff that stops us and trips us up, and this is the stuff that keeps us in those patterns. And oftentimes I hear people say, why can't I break through this? Why do I keep getting stopped? So I'm going to ask an even deeper question. So clear that you lean into the fear. You have sort of these areas that you want to be curious about. Is it the tools? Am I scared to be honest, afraid to hurt someone? So let's say you come up to the conclusion that, yeah, I'm scared to be honest. And yes, I'm afraid that honesty will hurt someone. Then what?
Mm-hmm. Then you sit with it. Then you see how that feels. I like to see how it feels in my body. I like to take account of what's around me. What environment am I in? I'm huge about creating a space where you feel safe, and like certain objects that make you feel safe. I love to create a space where ideas can flow through in and out, and things don't stay trapped. It's really about keeping it moving. So sometimes I sit down and do breath work. And, if that fear comes up, sometimes it's just about acknowledging it and letting it pass, just acknowledge it, say, hey, okay, I see you. You're not going anywhere clearly, but this is what I'm trying to do, and so you work with it. I think that's really the basis of my perspective on life, really, is that you can't shove things in a hole. You can't close the door on things like that. It never works out in your favor if you ignore and neglect, especially feelings. And so how can you integrate these things? I'm writing an article about polarity right now. Like, is polarity always bad? That's a question I have, and I'm coming to know it's not. So, okay, how do you hold both and, both and, not yes, no, but it's both and then work with it, and as sometimes an idea that gives you resistance, you need to ask what the ultimate goal is. Sometimes we have intentions for something to be exactly what we think. But the world is really out to help us if we allow it to. Yeah. But there, between that and us, is trust. You have to trust that it's going to do that.
So I have a question about that then. So I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Did you want to finish that?
Yeah.
thought?
So just sometimes it takes a different form than you had first thought it was going to. And that's the true form of whatever you're trying to make.
Yeah. So you talk about flow and security, creating security, acknowledging, letting it pass, trusting. So my question then lands on trust. The difference between like that whole sense of you feel it in your body and being guided by our intuition and trusting that knowing, but then sometimes fear is also a feeling that we have deep inside. So how do we know that it's intuition versus fear?
Fear is always sort of the gatekeeper of something deeper, of something more pure. It's a more pure thought. Feeling it, or fear, just sort of covers it up. There's always something under there, whether it's I am scared to be alone, I am scared I won't be accepted, I am scared of something like that. There is something under there. But just to say I am scared, you have to finish the sentence, and then you can work on, if it's I'm scared to be alone, then the deeper root is abandonment. So track where you might feel abandoned in your life and go heal that, work on that, because that leads the pathway to everything else becoming whole.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm really kind of like digging in, and I didn't know we were going there.
I think it's just part of me.
Well, and
I like to go in.
Yeah. And it's so much a part of, again, the conversations that I have with my clients. Like oftentimes they want to be confident, or they want more clarity on the next step of their life. And I always say it starts at the deepest, innermost part of you. It's a going within process, not a putting on. And often people are even resistant to that idea. And I just say, you just trust me. And those that are willing to do that work and you said the comment, those that are willing to find community, those that are willing to be consistent, those that are willing to be still, which I think the pandemic provided for many of us. There is a path, but it isn't obvious or quickly as obvious as sometimes learning a new skill or taking on a new, tactic or, So thank you for just saying that. I would love to ask, what do you do when you're feeling uninspired?
When I'm uninspired, I have learned to allow myself to feel uninspired. and that it's okay. You can't be creative 1,000% of the time. So I sit and I think, what's the next best thing I'd like to do right now? And I try not to put a fence around that. It could be cooking myself some food. It could be organizing something, when I'm actually trying to write a play, So what's the next best feeling thing I can do?
Yeah, I love that. I'm just going to share. It's like, I love the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Have you ever read that book?
I have, yes.
Yeah, it's incredible. But she talks about when she was feeling uninspired, she went out and started gardening. Something else active, physical, creating beauty, creating order. And then that was the inspiration for her book, The Signature of All Things.
Amazing. Yeah. The next best thing. Because it's just about feeling. It's just about, if you feel good doing something, everything will continue to, set itself up that way for you. So it doesn't matter really what it is. It's just to feel good,
Awesome.
Productive, making. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you ready for what was a moment that you felt like you had made it, or that you'd never make it, or never made it?
Let's say that I didn't make it.
Okay. So what was a moment that you felt like you'd never make it?
I was standing on the street corner of 72nd and 3rd Avenue in New York, and called my friend who was auditioning for In the Heights with me. We both went through all of the auditions and got in the final callbacks. And I said, "Have you heard anything?" And he said, "Yeah, I got the offer." And in that moment, my stomach sank and I knew I didn't get the offer.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's
heartbreak. It was the first big heartbreak. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the moment that you felt like you had made it?
I felt like I'd really achieved something when I booked the made-for-TV movie on ABC of Dirty Dancing. Andy Blankenbuehler choreographed that. And when I went to the audition, from the moment we started learning the choreography, I felt like I was in my prime. Like I felt everything was working with me, and I was enjoying it. I felt like I was that character. And it continued as easily as that through all of the auditions. And I ended up making it. I booked it, and it was a wonderful, first TV job.
That is so good and so helpful. And as we wrap up our conversation, I just want to repeat how people can get a hold of you, your website, sort of things to keep on the horizon, keep an eye out for on the horizon. So would you share with us that information again?
Yeah, for sure. You can access my website, alessandranyc.com. And there I will be releasing all of my, upcoming projects. I have a couple film projects coming up, and also my writings available in audio form will be there. And I'm on Instagram, Ali, ALI_Marco, MARCO.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll put all that in the show notes too. So
awesome.
It was so great. This conversation was, really inspiring, but also really, really helpful. And I think valuable for those listening that really want to expand into new opportunities, but might be held back a little bit with their own resistances. So thank you.
Amazing. Yes, you're very welcome. Thank you, Al.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of She Made It. Our goal is to reach as many women as possible through this podcast to inspire them to find their truest, most creative selves. And we need your help. Apple Podcasts is way more likely to put our show on other people's radar if we have reviews. If you've enjoyed even just one episode of She Made It, we'd be so honored if you left a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. It's easiest to do this through the Apple Podcasts app on your phone, and if you're not sure how, just go to elzimmerman.com/review if you need some instructions. Thank you so much in advance. We cannot wait to hear from you.